I'm pretty excited about it, especially after the one that we learned last night. Tonight is entitled Exposure Therapy. And this is a very simple yet very powerful strategy to modify your behaviors. A lot of us are already in process of this, whether we realize it or not. And I actually got exposed to this from Scales about maybe 3 weeks or a month ago. Mr. Scales asked me to look into this some. Um, so I did. I did a deep dive on it. I got pretty exposed to it. And it's complex and yet very simple at the same time. Well, let's just get into it. Exposure therapy is a type of psychological treatment that involves helping people confront their fears in a safe and controlled environment. The goal of exposure therapy is to reduce the fear and anxiety that a person experiences when exposed to a trigger or a stimuli that causes distress. Just like we talked about last night, when we do feel that trigger, when we feel that activating behavior go into effect, we're going to journal it, right? Well, with this, we can actually practice that and fast forward the process in conjunction with the journal, but in an actually safe environment. Instead of having to feel the trigger of a trade of too many contracts, going against us or averaging it down or these type of things, we can actually practice this so that when we do face this in a real situation, it gives us a chance to properly modify our behavior to come up with the correct outcome. And during exposure therapy, a person is gradually exposed to the trigger or stimuli that causes them that anxiety. You've heard me say in other series, we've talked about anxiety, performance anxiety, fight or flight. We talked about all these things, and there's always a trigger that causes that. There's sometimes for you, it could just be showing up to the market can sometimes cause you anxiety, and it can, trigger that flight or fight response. Well, this can be done through a variety of methods, such as imaginal exposure, in which the person imagines the trigger, in vivo exposure, in which the person is directly exposed to the trigger in real life, and virtual reality exposure, in which the person is exposed to the trigger in a simulated environment. Think of some people do this in like a haunted house. It's a simulated environment that's meant to trigger people's fear response and, cause horror for them. But ultimately, it's imagined. Just like, a lot of our emotions, just like fear in itself, it's a response to something that hasn't actually negatively happened. That's what we're looking to curb here, and that's how we're looking to modify our behavior in a way that's safe for us. Some people, myself included, have gone out on a racetrack with a driver in a controlled environment and actually raced a race car. Now, with me not having any experience, that wouldn't be safe to give me such a high-powered automobile, turn me loose on the racetrack. But when you put that in a safe environment that's semi-controlled, you're able to push the limits of your comfort zone, and you're able to push what your body is capable of. Driving that race car was one of the finest experiences I've ever had. And we can do that in trading. We can actually practice this. We can imagine the things. And especially, I'm going to cover this a little bit more, but think about if you're imagining danger and the triggers that set you off, we can easily work through in our cognitive journal why we shouldn't be afraid of that and why we shouldn't feel anxiety. Imagine, if the worst case scenario is you blowing up your account or your internet dying in the middle of a trade, and then, you're scared just to show up or just to bet one contract, you can talk yourself backwards from that with the imaginal therapy. And in the in vivo exposure, a lot of us do that every day, and we've seen it in this chat. Some people, when we started this Discord, came in here and they were scared just to come in, just to look at the market, just to possibly take a trade. And now we're seeing those confidence levels grow. And whether we realized it or not, it was from exposure therapy. So this way, now that we know what it is, now that we're defining it, we can control it for our benefit in a much better way. Let's talk about what are some of the fears that we face in trading. There's a myriad of them, but probably one of the biggest ones is losing money, right? Nobody wants to lose money, okay? And then you have some of the other people in here who have some money, who have been trading, who've had a lot of exposure therapy, and they fear being wrong. We've heard it so many times. Man, I just couldn't let that go because I didn't want to be wrong. I didn't want to admit that I was wrong. I didn't want to let it go. I just knew that it was going to come back in my direction. How about just wasting time? There's other things we could be doing besides staring at the market. Are we actually sitting here looking at this and being profitable, or are we just wasting our time? That's something we could be scared of. Obviously, one of the biggest ones for people, blowing your account. It's a fear. Nobody wants to do it. Hopefully, if you haven't done it, that's awesome. Great on you. If you have done it, hopefully you learn from it. Hopefully you can recover. Hopefully you're able to refund your account and rebuy and learn the lessons and not do it again. How about just simply the fear of failure? This is a thing that we face in a lot of aspects of life. This is a thing that, nobody ever wants to fail. Nobody ever wants to admit that they were a failure. And we've approached those type of thinkings in other chats that, if you're failing forward, if you're learning, if you're analyzing, if you're data tracking, you're not really failing, you're learning, you're improving, you're growing. But what we can do is we can use exposure therapy to help someone who has a fear of losing money, who has a fear of failure, who has a fear of being wrong. And what we can do, this person may be anxious about making decisions or maybe overly risk averse due to their fear of money. How can we practically apply that to our trading careers? How can we practically use exposure therapy to modify our behaviors to become less afraid of those things? So, for an example, during exposure therapy, the trader might start by imagining scenarios where they make a trade and lose money. Just that simple. Okay, and we talked about the inverse of this principle in the 12 laws of the universe, how your body reacts emotion wise, chemical wise, to imagining the outcomes that you desire. We talked about imagining the house you want to live in, feel yourself, barefoot walking across the floor, smell the smell of how it will smell when you're in the kitchen cooking your favorite meal. Imagine the relaxation when you're sitting inside your house and it's exactly the design that you want, the couch that you want, the bed that you want. Well, this same principle can also work the opposite way if we can imagine ourselves taking a trade and losing money. We can simulate that trigger point and then use the ABCD journal that we talked about yesterday to challenge those. When we're able to do that, we're able to overcome some of that fear. We're able to, pardon me, guys, it sounds like my dogs are going insane. I don't know what's going on. I thought somebody came in my yard for a second or something. Sorry to interrupt the chat. But what we can do is then simulate those, write down our trigger into the ABCD thought journal, and challenge, just like we said yesterday. Objection in the court. Objection. We can challenge those without actually having to take that bad trade, without actually having to blow up our account, without actually having to face the fear of being right or wrong. We can simulate it. And so what we can do from there is practice. You heard me say all the way back since my first series, where we talked about suck less, we talked about practice and how important practice was. We talked about how important preparation was. So if you think of those thought triggers and those imaginal therapy as, the preparation, then this would be your practice. And we talked about back then that perfect practice becomes perfect performance. Well, here, if you're able to go into that simulator, especially some of the people that are playing futures or that have played futures or that are planning on playing futures, we addressed this past Sunday on how incredible this simulator is. It's real time. No bad feels, no weird option calculations, just a real life in and out simulator. Now you can go inside there and you can gradually increase your risk until you become more comfortable. You can actually simulate that behavior of, I'm winning. You can push yourself to the point where you feel that fear, say, oh, I'm losing. I'm feeling that failure. I'm feeling that fear of being wrong. And you're not actually using real money for possibly the first time ever. In fact, a few months ago, before we found this simulator, OT and I were actively against paper trading because you couldn't feel it. But I can tell you from my own self, you can feel those same emotions inside this simulator, guys. I promise you, especially if you take it serious, you do what you're supposed to do and help you to be a better trader. And then another idea here, and we've had some people in here talk about it, including the person who exposed me to this therapy. They could work with somebody outside of it, like a therapist. You could get education on your risk management. You could help that person develop strategies for making informed, confident trades. And there's nothing wrong with that, guys. And if you can't or won't go talk to a therapist, talk to your battle buddy. Talk to your battle buddy about the simulation that you made for yourself. Talk to your battle buddy about the things that you're imagining for yourself. This is how we make progress in traders to change our behavior. A battle buddy, Mikey, is an accountability partner, which you saw today. I posted to try to get you an accountability partner. I guess everybody's matched up with one. The next person who joins, hopefully we can get you one. But that's what I call a battle buddy. But moving on from that, what we can do is we can now take that simulation first from our thought, just like everything else. It all starts with the thought. We can practice it in the simulator, and then we can move that forward to real life practice. And as the person becomes more comfortable with the idea of losing money and is able to manage their risk effectively, you can begin to apply those skills in a real life environment. That's the time when we're seeing now with a lot of ourselves in Discord. But when you get ready, let's just say you're at a one contract level now and you decide that you want to grow or et cetera, what happened? The same thing with, Zarento and MP Mag. They were wrestlers in high school, obviously, and they were clearly wrapped up in that. Did they just automatically go to a wrestling meet on a Saturday morning and start out, instantly wrestling against guys that were way better than them? No, they didn't. And it's the same principle with trading. You start out with your practice. You start out with learning your forms. You start out, with practicing against the people who are in your same group. And then you take that out into the real world to compete, which is what we're doing. And it's not necessarily that we're competing against the hedge funds. We're competing against our own self. As OT and I say a lot of times, we're competing against our own self to be better than we were yesterday. And if you do that in a consistent, measurable progress to be better than you were yesterday consistently, pretty soon you're going to do what? Just like we always talk about, you're going to look up and say, man, I'm a better trader. I'm a consistent trader. I'm sure that MP Mag and Zarento both got pinned to the mat, but as they continue on into their high school careers, they were able to eventually get better, eventually pin somebody else to the mat, eventually, possibly win a wrestling meet. And then high school's over and you got to figure out what you're going to compete into next. So we got here the 4 P's we can do. is we can, or I say the 4 P's. I skipped a slide ahead because I was distracted. We can practice in this simulator so that we can give ourselves that simulation of real life trading, of real life fear, of real life risking money. Then we can prepare mentally through our visualizations, first of all, with the fear, with the anxiety, with the risking money, and then compensating those thoughts through our ABC journal. We don't necessarily want to live in that place of fear. We don't want to live in that place of anxiety. We don't want to live in that place of stress. We want to be able to teach our body how to adapt to it, how to process that stress in a way that is beneficial towards us. Then we take that process and we move on to 1 contract, 2 contracts, 3 contracts, and we continue to stretch our growth zone until eventually we're trading at the level that we want to be at based on our risk management strategy, based on our growth goals. Think about, and that's also why I love these funded accounts, because you can have the chance to earn money, but you limit your downside risk in such a way that even though you're losing money you could have made for yourself, you're not losing actual real money past your monthly membership fee. But imagine these Wall Street guys, these hedge fund guys, they don't just come out of college and get one of these jobs and then all of a sudden trade millions of dollars. They start out with analyzing. They get a filing position, then they get an analyst position, then they get a trading desk job, then they get a floor job. Back when they used to have floor jobs, now it's all a trading desk job. But that used to be the progression. Same thing with us. And I know in my career that I jumped out there as big as I could get, and I didn't have a chance to have exposure therapy. I had some money and I was dangerous to myself because no one taught me the process of exposure therapy. And a lot of us are still doing that right now. In our real lives, we're high performers. So we say, well, if everything I do works in my real life, how's the stock market any different? Let me jump out there and go ahead and say, I'm going to risk it all on the line and go ahead and lose, a year's salary. That's not good for us, guys. And that's why here in this Discord, especially, we practice exposure therapy. We practice the process of learning. We practice the process of trading. But now that we've learned more about this, we're actually defining that situation to let ourselves do it in an even more controlled environment. When you get past talking to 1 contract, we've obviously associated the battle buddy system. And some of this that I'm talking about right now is playing in reverse for some of you guys. But we also have some guys that are new. We have future people still to come. And I want to make sure I cover all this so that the process continues to get refined, because that is the most important thing. We say it all the time: process over profits, process over profits, process over profits. But that's even something that OT and I talk about in building this Discord to absolutely give you guys the best Discord that we can ever make. We talk about our processes. We want to build it in a process situation so that we can handle sustainable growth, so that those of you who are learning and growing can become a more experienced mentor towards the newer people, and then that continues to grow as we grow. And that's the last point on here: is talk to someone who's more qualified than you. Ask OT questions. If your battle buddy is more experienced than you, ask them questions. Ask questions in on videos that you're watching on YouTube, and hopefully the people will respond back to you. Continue to talk to people who are more qualified than you. That's the way that the system works properly in every aspect of life. Just like when I became a welder, I started welding at the company I worked at for a long time, 3 days out of high school. And I joined what was called an apprenticeship program. In the stock market, I'm not really sure if there is any, established apprenticeship programs. But that's what we're trying to create here. You go through things in a series of events, in a series of stages. And even with this behavior change, I was able to talk to Scales, who was more in tune with behavior change therapy, which got me to look into this exposure therapy. And that's where we can always learn from other people. Talk to people more qualified than you. We talked about ever since the Suck Less series, the 4Ps. You guys know what they are. I say them all the time. Prior planning prevents poor performance. And we're going to do that preparation. We're going to do that practice. We're going to do that perfect practice. And then we're going to go out there and we're going to perform. When it's time to execute our trade, we're going to execute our trade. We're going to go out there and we're going to collect the bag. We're going to get the profits. And like Skadoosh says, we're going to get the money from the man. We're going to fight the power for the small guys like Robin Hood, because that's our main job here, is to gain that money. And any edge that we can possibly give ourselves, whether it's practicing, whether it's preparation, whether it's, et cetera, talking to somebody, behavior change therapy, like the journal that I gave y'all last night, like the, the different things that we're going over in this chat, the technical issues that OT addresses in his chat. The more and more that we can refine our edge, the more and more that we can sharpen our tools, the more and more that we can gain and access more tools to make us better, effective traders, the better off that we're going to be. And that's really the main goal of this Discord. It's really the main goal of our chats. It's really the main goal that of everything that OT and I do here, is to help as many people become competent traders as possible. Tonight's chat is going to be kind of short. I got a call to action because, like I said, on this chat series from tonight, it's basically playing in reverse. You guys are doing exposure therapy now. Now that you know this, you're able to do it in a more cognizant way. You're able to do this exposure therapy, including your ABCD journal. And so for tonight, I just want to say, show up tomorrow. I've got a very interesting things to talk about tomorrow. But for the main part of tomorrow, what I really want to do is hear from y'all. And I'm going to challenge each and every one of y'all to come up with a question to some way that OT or I could possibly help y'all. And please show up with how something from here has helped you guys. Some way. We talked about the 12 spiritual laws of the universe. We talked about data tracking. We talked about your planning and performance, clearing your desk, etc., in all these past series. And I think it's time for me to do a check-in. I think it's time for me to really have an interactional thing. I've sat out here and poured my heart to y'all. I've continued to show you new ways to refine your edge and improve. I've continued to really give to y'all. I want you guys to give back to me a little bit. I need some feedback. I need to know what else you guys are interested in learning about, because like I said, the chat tonight I learned from Scales. We were talking about stuff and he said, check into exposure therapy. Here we are. So tomorrow I really need you guys to be interactive with me and show up with as much ammo as you can of things you want to see from me and OT, of things that you've done that have helped, and let's hear about it, because OT has some big announcements that he's going to be making on the next couple Fridays. And I'm ready to hear about it, guys, so that I can improve and continue to give you guys the most value in this Discord that I can from my small piece of it. That's all I got for tonight, Mr. OT. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I hope that everybody's in a good place this week. Green today and tomorrow. Finish it out strong.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you.